In 1955, the city of Glasgow, with a population of around 1 million, was not only the major port of Scotland, but also one of the world's great engineering and manufacturing centres. A city of smoke and sets, steel and shipbuilding. From yards along the Clyde, many vessels were launched. Locomotives were exported to every continent. Heavy engineering offered employment on a massive scale, as did textiles. The city's industrial base seemed secure. Few could have forecast that within a relatively short time span, so many of Glasgow's traditional industries would disappear. Equally, although the city's world-famous tram system did seem threatened, no one could have foreseen it would be gone within 7 years, replaced by buses and trolleybuses. Glasgow's trams were interwoven into the very fabric of the city. They carried millions from their tenement homes to the docks, shipyards, factories, cinemas, theatres, dance halls, public houses, churches, parks, shops, barrowland, railway stations, and football matches. They radiated miles beyond the Glasgow city boundary, often into open country. They worked a rich variety of routes at frequent intervals at remarkably cheap fares. Other methods of transport certainly existed. An underground railway, Glasgow's best-kept secret. From 1924, corporation buses. From 1949, trolleybuses. An extensive suburban rail network. As well as some fascinating Clyde ferries. But it was the trams which were at the heart of Glasgow's daily pattern of life. The story had started on the 19th of August 1872 with the opening by a private company of the first horse-car route shown in green on the map. The unusual 4 foot 7 3/4 track gauge was adopted so that railway wagons could operate over the tram tracks. This first happened in 1873 on the independent line in the adjacent borough of Govan, linking Elder's shipyard to the main rail network. Glasgow Corporation refused to renew the horse car company lease, beginning its own service in 1894 using an entirely new fleet of vehicles. The two routes in Govan were leased to Glasgow Corporation in 1896. The Vale of Clyde had been steam operated. The lines were electrified in 1901-1902. The corporation's first electric service was opened in October 1898, seen here in red. It ran between the city and the industrial district of Springburn, then centre of the world's locomotive construction industry. Service was provided by 21 American-style single-deckers, numbers 665 to 685. Built at the corporation's Copler Hill works, they had a centre entrance leading to two separate saloons, similar to Glasgow tenement houses of the time, a layout which gave them their nickname Room and Kitchen or Button Ben cars. They were short-lived, some being converted to works cars. In contrast, the city's four-wheel standard double-deckers proved robust and durable, some clocking up 60 years of service. Note the identifying blue route band. Other colours used by the corporation were red, green, white and yellow. These colour codes were gradually abandoned between 1938 and 1952. The standards underwent 4 major phases of development. 541 Phase 1 standards were built between 1898 and 1904. They had round dashes, internal monitor roofs, 6-foot wheelbase trucks and 2 30-horsepower motors. All but 80 were constructed at Copler Hill. Note the conductor dutifully holding the trolley rope as the car turns from Cambridge Street into Sauchiehall Street. A single-decker passes in the background, and one of a batch of 120 horse trams converted for electric use turns into Argyle Street. 975 was one of 80 cars built by the Gloucester Carriage and Wagon Company. Another converted horse car is seen crossing Glasgow Bridge, together with some Phase 2 standards which involved the addition of top covers. The most successful cover was the short canopy type, attached to most new cars built between 1904 and 1910, as well as to most of the Phase 1 standards, such as 741 and White Car 532. Phase 2 standards seen in Springburn on a Sunday outing. The Phase 3 standards, built between 1910 and 1924, had driver's vestibules, hexagonal-shaped dashes, 7-foot wheelbase trucks, and latterly more powerful motors. A few had experimental trucks. Again, older standards were gradually upgraded, but as late as 1922, 729 was still virtually in Phase 1 condition, when it was selected with horse car 543 to celebrate 50 years of tramway operation on August the 19th. "729 was eventually top-covered in 1924, achieving Phase 3 status in 1925. Note the louvered vents on 729, non-standard for this type of car. These post-First World War scenes show Glaswegians enjoying a Sunday stroll near the Botanic Gardens. Others, however, would escape from the grime of the city by travelling Doon the Watter by Clyde steamer to Rothsay on the Isle of Bute, where they could enjoy a ride on the 5-mile tramway to Ettrick Bay. This map shows the extent of the mileage operated outside the city boundary in 1920, as well as Glasgow's neighbouring company-owned systems. Dumbarton in the northwest shown in blue, Paisley to the west in brown, and the Lanarkshire Tramways Company to the southeast in green. Also the isolated 3.5-mile Airdrie and Coatbridge Tramway Company's line in pink. Pursuing Glasgow's expansionist policy of linking the city to neighbouring communities by tram, the corporation acquired the Airdrie Coatbridge Company with its 15 cars in 1921. An impressive 2.25-mile reserve track tramway was constructed during 1923 to connect up with the main Glasgow system at Baillieston. In August 1923, Glasgow assumed control of the 32-mile Paisley District Tramways Company with its mixed fleet of 73 cars. Glasgow had operated through to Paisley Cross since 1905. A connection was soon added at Rook and Glen, but that at Renfrew Cross had to wait until 1932. Glasgow had now overtaken Manchester to become the second largest tramway system in the country, outstripped only by London. It operated over 130 route miles, of which about a third was outside the city boundaries. Neighbouring Dumbarton closed in 1928. The Lanarkshire network by 1931, and two of the ex-Paisley services, Kilbarchan in 1932 and Abbots Inch in 1933. Within the city, the Finnieston to Stobcross Ferry shuttle had closed as early as 1925. Extensions included Clydebank to Duntocka 1924-5 and Hillfoot Mulgai in 1934. With so many interurban type services coupled with increasing motorbus competition, Copler Hill built an experimental high-speed passenger flow single-decker, number 1089 in 1926. Although technically successful, the car's low seating capacity rendered it economically unviable. In a move to improve the poor riding quality of the standards, two were experimentally retrucked on maximum traction bogies. One, number 142, was also lengthened. As part of a wholesale modernisation, Copler Hill built one double-bogie car number 1090 to act as a pattern for a further 50 cars to be constructed by outside firms. Delivered between 1927 and 1929, 1091 to 1140 were nicknamed Kilmarnocks, after the engineering company who manufactured their maximum traction bogies. Tracks laid on the new George V Bridge in 1928 improved the north-south flow of trams. Despite the age of some of the older standards, all underwent a fourth phase of development. Between 1928 and 1935, they were totally enclosed. Most received improved braking, upholstered seats, 60 horsepower motors, 8-foot trucks, and bow collectors. There were, however, many subdivisions. For example, the semi-high-speed cars, such as 949, which retained 7-foot trucks, and 45 horsepower motors cascaded from newer standards already modernized. These pre-war views taken during a school outing. Note the gold fleet numerals. Some semi-high-speed cars, like 925, were scrapped by 1939. Others survived to be fully upgraded, the last in 1954. 751 was one of a handful mounted on EMB swing-axle trucks. (1937) coronation year was marked by the introduction of two revolutionary double-deckers, 1141 and 1142. The latter appearing in a striking red, silver, grey and blue livery. 1142 was swiftly dubbed the coronation car. The 150 production cars, 1143 to 1292, emerged from the works between 1937 and 1941 in a new livery of green, cream and orange. Special features included folding platform doors, separate driver's cab with external door, modern heating, ventilation and lighting, and upholstered seats, which could still be reversed at the terminus in time-honoured tradition. On the outbreak of war, mast headlamps, white fenders and darkened lighting were introduced. Note the standard on the 20-mile Airdrie-Elderslie service. To improve timekeeping, this was split in two in 1943. Following a decision not to proceed with a huge order for more coronations, an attempt was made to produce a cheaper two-axle version. Lightweights 1001 to 1004 were built in 1939-40, and a fifth, number 6, was added in 1942, after the original was destroyed in a Luftwaffe raid. In 1941, maximum traction car 1100 was partially modernised with coronation-style ends, remote control equipment and coloured route lights as used in Edinburgh. It survived on shipyard extras until 1961. In 1947, a unidirectional car, number 1005, entered service, nicknamed Bluebird, but more commonly known as the Blue Devil. With both doors on the near side, it was mounted on Maley and Taunton inside-bearing equal-wheel bogies, with Vanback remote control equipment and 4 45 horsepower motors. A demonstration of the power-operated doors. In 1948, Glasgow had 11 depots, of which Newlands on the south side was the largest, with a capacity of 201 cars. Note one of the lightweights allocated there until 1951. Maintaining and operating the network was labour-intensive and costly. Revenue from fares was no longer meeting expenditure. Wages for the 13,000 staff accounted for 71% of the revenue. Fare rises, the end of petrol rationing and the advent of television simply drove more people off the trams or persuaded them to buy a car. The problem was exacerbated by the elderly standards. All had received body strengthening pre-war. From the 1950s, many had substantial external body bracing. Some of the last semi-high-speed cars were retrucked and fitted with high-speed motors. Their longevity, however, was an increasing liability. Between 1948 and 1952, the hard-press works built 100 Mark II coronations, 1293 to 1392. General Manager Fitzpaine failed to gain approval to build the last 10 as 44-seater single-deckers, suitable for operating a modern tramway, including central area subways. This map shows the extent of the system in 1948, plus the main post-war extensions in red. In the west, a siding at Porterfield Road, Renfrew, opened in October 1948 to serve a large engineering works. In the south, an all-street track branch to Carnwadrick opened the following month. And in the northwest, a three-quarter-mile reserve track extension to Blair-Dardy opened in 1949. Closures allowed withdrawal of further life-expired standards, including the remaining ex-Paisley cars. 1948 Broome House to Uddingston in the east. The closures of 1949 involved the cross-city Provan Mill Polmadie service, eventually replaced by trolleybuses. The rural single-track and loop section in the southwest between Cross Stobbs and Glenfield, home of the semi-high-speed standards. And Service 20 to Duntocka in the northwest, with its cut-down double-deckers. The closures of 1951-53 involved the following sections. Sinclair Drive through the Gorbals and over Stockwell Street Bridge. Auchenshuggle to Carmyle in the east. And Clarkston in the south replaced by trolleybuses. Note a surviving yellow car in this 1950 view, and 509 scrapped as early as 1953, the year which also marked the end of the ex-Paisley cars. The dwindling fleet strength was partially replenished by the purchase of 46 Green Goddess bogie cars from Liverpool in 1953-4. In Glasgow they were re-gauged, but due to clearance problems on certain curves were restricted to services 15 and 29. Liverpool trucks were used under 6 additional coronation bodies built in 1954. Over 1,300 trams had been constructed at Copler Hill Works. The pace of closures was now set to increase. In 1955, concerned about growing traffic congestion, the corporation accepted the recommendations of the Ingalls Report, which included scrapping the tram system over a period of time, electrifying the suburban rail network, and abandoning the out-of-boundary tram services as soon as possible. On top of this, 10 tram services, mainly south of the river, were to be replaced by buses and trolleybuses, to release 300 more elderly standards for scrap. Service 12 ultimately proved to be the last tram to trolleybus conversion in Britain. Each closure was marked by notices displayed in the cars. Trams along Rutherglen Main Street were withdrawn in August 1955 to increase the efficiency of the trolleybus network. These views date from 1926. Despite the withdrawal of the trams in August 1955, trolleybus operation between Shawfield and Rutherglen did not begin until February 1956. And the system was still expected to survive about 15 years. There were approximately 1,000 cars in stock, including over 650 standards, which, although working on most services for various practical reasons, were used solely on some services such as the 1, 12, 16, 17, 30 and 33. But with each passing month, a few more were withdrawn. Green Car 491 of 1903 went in November. White Car 536 in July. .790 was still on its EMB swing-link truck. The ex-Liverpool cars were all in operation by the middle of 1956. Alterations included access windows for the bow rope and single-piece windscreens. Unidirectional car 1005 was rebuilt to resemble a Mark II Coronation, or Cunarder as they were nicknamed. It re-entered service from Maryhill Depot in May 1956. In the south, Langside Depot, with its capacity for 130 cars, closed to trams on September the 29th, 1956. In these views, taken a year earlier, Tool Van 27, ex-Paisley No. 5, and the first, 1005, is driven out for the photographer. It is followed by Set Wagon No. 34 of 1937. Pursuing the Beyond the Boundary closure policy, the section of Service 14 beyond Arden, shown here in red, was withdrawn without direct replacement on September the 29th, 1956. Involved was some of the most attractive and distinctive mileage on the system. The 3¼ mile section beyond Arden, which was to close, was all over track formerly owned by the Paisley District Tramways, and included the 2¼ mile roadside light railway opened as early as 1910 to link Paisley and Bar Head with Rook and Glen. Features included a cross-country cut-off over the Brock Burn, a level crossing with the rail connection to the Nits Hill Fireclay Works, a 1 in 19 grade on Park House Road, a gated entrance to the reservation fallen into disrepair, and delightful tree-lined roads where the cars brush the hedgerows. 629 of 1901 was scrapped in 1957. Bar Head, and a McGill's bus on the route which also served the countrified tram section to Glenfield, withdrawn in 1949. Cross Dobbs Terminus, 9 miles and 49 minutes from central Glasgow. On board now, approaching Bar Head Centre. Under the Caledonian Railway Bridge in Bar Head, Park House Road, today occupied by the South Nits Hill housing scheme. The steep grade down to Nits Hill Road. This was the starting point for a wartime runaway which failed to negotiate the tight curve in the background of this scene. Former red car 767 of 1900 was withdrawn following this closure. Despite fuel shortages caused by the Suez crisis, 3 more over-the-boundary sections were abandoned without replacement on the 3rd and 4th of November 1956. Airdrie in the east was served by the 15 and 23 until October 1954, when the latter was cut back to Bayliston. Coronations operated the majority of duties. These 1956 views show some of the alterations applied to these cars in the mid-1950s. The provision of an access flap to reach the bow rope on the car on the left, a single-pane windscreen and a flush panel replacing the ventilators above the windscreen. Standards were used, 3 being included in Coatbridge's final allocation of 19 cars. 673 is seen outside the depot. 20 on a through working to Anderston Cross the city terminus of the 15, and 245, filmed on the local Langloan Airdrie shuttle. '20 again, also on the local at Coatdyke. Airdrie terminus, 12 miles and 1 hour from the city, all for 6 old pence, 2.5p. "1226 departs to descend through Airdrie town centre. An outbound coronation leaves Coatdyke for Airdrie. Inbound cars pass beneath Coatdyke railway bridge. Alongside Coatbridge depot, seen on the right. Coatbridge. Despite following the course and the contours of the parallel road, the Langloan Baillieston Reservation was a line for high-speed running. The 15 was curtailed to terminate at Baillieston, slightly under 6 route miles being abandoned, including the whole of the former Airdrie and Coatbridge system. The short stub at Cambuslang precluded the use of modern cars on former Red Service 17. Situated 4.5 miles from Glasgow, Cambuslang was known as the largest village in Scotland. Gloomy weather for the final afternoon of operation. Cambuslang Main Street. Eastfield. The 17 was cut back to terminate at Farm Cross. Trams only reached Milngavie in 1934, thereby creating Glasgow's longest service, 21.5 miles to Renfrew Ferry, which lasted until 1943. 7 miles from Glasgow, the terminus at Milngavie was on the fringe of the town. With the arrival of the Green Goddesses, a revised 29 service was created in 1953. "1171 passes the W. Alexander bus garage close to the site of the Benny railplane. Kessington. Killamont. The 29 was cut back to a crossover at Garscube Estate, East Lodge Gate, Mary Hill. This was also used by Service 40, which closed without replacement on the 3rd of November. The 40 ran via Maryhill Road to Ibrox or Dumbreck via Paisley Road West. From 1957, track lifting operations became a depressingly familiar sight. These scenes in Cambuslang. Closure and vehicle reallocation led to coronations appearing for the first time on the truncated 17. Cunadas from Newlands on the 5, 5A and 24, and goddesses from Parkhead on the 15. 563 standards were still officially in stock. They operated nearly all journeys on the 1, 16 and 33, and exclusively on the 30, and the 12. Central area activity in Hope Street. Note the recently repainted coronation. And the continental-style standee trolleybuses introduced in Glasgow in 1953. Baillieston Terminus was relocated to the west side of the A8 on February the 10th, leading to abandonment of the last few yards of the 1923 reserve track. May the 11th, 1957 saw the end of trams in Paisley and Renfrew, closure having been delayed for 3 months by the Suez crisis. The 4 and 27 were curtailed to the city boundary at Hillington Road. The 21 and 28 were withdrawn without direct replacement. The 8-mile interurban service 21 operated one way in and out of St Vincent Street, the cars diverging at Tradeston. As far as Crookston, the 21 shared tracks with the 22 and 32, along Paisley Road West, through Halfway and Cardonald. Beyond Crookston, the 21 became more interurban in character, with loading islands at several stops. "929, one of Eldersley's former semi-high-speed cars, is rostered to pick up churchgoers on a Sunday working from Hawkhead Road, Paisley. A typical Sunday morning scene. Glasgow Road. Central Paisley with a city-bound 21. The focus of operations was Paisley Cross.